Welcome back to another video episode of Digital Oil and Gas. My name is Geoffrey Cann, and today I am joined by Ian Cunningham, who is the CEO of Wave9 Technology. And we're going to talk about an upcoming conference that we're both attending, taking place in Houston in a week's time, the 15th and 16th of September, and should be a lot of fun. But Ian and I thought we would get together and have a little chat about what the event is all about. So Ian, welcome to Digital Oil and Gas.
Thanks, Geoffrey. Yeah, great to have a conversation about this again.
Yes, it's a very exciting time. Finally, conferences are back in action, although this one's going to be a mixed hybrid in-person one. In the fullness of time, hopefully we'll get back to more full in-person events. But, for those who don't know you, Ian, maybe you could just provide a quick personal introduction.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Ian Cunningham. I'm the CEO of Wave9 Technology Incorporated. I have a background in wireless communication development, digital systems design, including industrial IoT and data analytics. And my company, Wave9, helps producers to reduce their operating costs as well as their environmental impacts using the technology platform that automates well site inspections, including operational performance improvements.
Brilliant. And of course, for those who don't know me, I'm an author, trainer, public speaker, and I focus, my passion is at the intersection of things that are digital and things that are oil and gas. And what I try to do is help the industry embrace the changes that these technologies provide. Which is why, Ian, you and I are sort of kindred spirits, if you like. We both have a deep and personal passion for this, so it's a sort of an important topic area. Now, I know in preparation for this event, there were lots of topics that are top of mind for you. Maybe I'll just turn the conversation over to you to kind of get us going here with the first question of the day.
Yeah, sure. To frame it up, those topics that are important to us are things like autonomous systems, IoT, AI integration into different digital systems and things like that. And we're really interested to have conversations all around that space to understand what people are doing. But I think it'd be interesting, I guess, to start with just the big picture, Geoffrey. I'm interested in what are some of the biggest challenges that you see right now facing the industry and how maybe some of those are shifting.
Yeah, the headwinds on the industry now are probably the most extreme that I've seen for quite some time. We have obviously the pandemic response, so industry has to really sort through and embrace a whole range of mitigation tactics to help maintain the security and safety of its workforce, in addition to the ongoing challenges of reliability and integrity for the assets and the environment. So we have this new incremental cost burden that's been layered on the industry, and there's no real practical way to recover it. Second is we have a very, very high pressures from capital markets related to environmental performance, social and governance issues, so the triple head of ESG. So with these pressures on the industry, the industry also has to now sort through different ways to operate, to make decisions. Then there's the wave of decarbonization. The COP26 is coming up very, very soon, with all nations needing to both stand up a proper roadmap and plan for how they intend to decarbonize, but to start committing real dollars to it. And on the receiving end of that is of course, the fossil fuel industry, which is one of the most significant contributor to the climate challenges that we face. So throw in energy transition as a fun measure. And then, of course, we've got growth. Like how do we grow ourselves as an industry out of this recessionary mess that we're in, thanks to that malignant virus, COVID-19. So, there's a lot of issues here to work through. These cost and productivity challenges have to be addressed. Getting capital returns sorted, figuring out where to invest in which areas of the business, which innovations to apply to. How to even just measure carbon is a significant problem for the industry. We haven't actually had to measure that because frankly, if you don't measure it, you can't effectively manage it. So that gives us, if you want to sort of look at the big picture view, that's certainly what I would see. And so, Ian, maybe you could share, what is it that your clients are doing? I mean, how are they prioritizing their capital investments? Because, they have to make this trade-off. Do they invest in a more traditional way, or do they invest in new production, new infrastructure, better technologies, and the like? What are you seeing?
Well, I think over the last few years, we've seen a couple of very dramatic shifts. Wave9 was our inception happened in 2018, and that sort of followed on the heels of some pricing pressure in commodities and things like that. And we saw at that point in time an opportunity to start getting involved in this, because we saw a shift away, maybe not away from the traditional drilling and capital allocation towards increased production necessarily, but at least a sharing of that, the allocation between increasing revenues and starting to consolidate some of the operations that were in place. So there were some cost reduction programs happening, and we saw some at a fairly wide scale starting to begin at that point in time too, where you might have an entire field of older assets that really hadn't been monitored in any way. And producers are starting to talk about reducing the number of site visits that they had and improving the overall process. And that was a really, really good trend that we saw happening until COVID. Then what happened when we got into the COVID situations, we saw producers really just curtail all sorts of investment. There was no expansion. There was production was cut back. People were temporarily laid off, things like this, right? But as we start to get towards the end of that, and producers are beginning to look forward to what happens afterwards, now I'm seeing a bit of a shift, initially a shift back to the old way of thinking around, like, let's just put all the money into developing new production, bringing new production online. But there are some very situational examples where companies are looking at opportunities to do that in such a way that they don't need to bring back the same size of team, or that they can start using their internal operations in order to manage a field, rather than bringing in contractors and things like this. So I think that there's some interesting shifts happening that way right now. And I think that as people see the opportunities because of the technology they're being introduced to now, I believe that trend from before will resume, where the operational cost reductions become higher in the minds of folks that are looking very long term at some of those other things you mentioned around ESG, emissions reductions, things like that, right? I think that there's some very interesting areas now starting to pop up that way.
Now, in my work, I looked at a number of what I would describe as the hot or leading technologies that, as far back as 2019, were really driving the adoption of innovation in the industry. And my newest book, which will be coming out in February, I've actually carried out 9 case studies of different companies throughout the industry on what they're using and seeing by way of technological innovations that really matter to them. And as one of the folks I interviewed said to me, they said, "Look, there is no lower cost investment in innovation that a CFO can possibly finance than just applying robotic process tools into the finance department. It's almost a guaranteed moneymaker with very very high ROI." So robotic tools at a minimum. Machine learning is really stepped up significantly. The industry is sitting on oceans and oceans of data, and these lots of optimization possibilities are lurking out there that the industry is starting to tap. And as I point out, all it takes is a 1 or 2% productivity boost. Utilization rate on a large high volume asset, and suddenly those returns go right to the bottom line. So they're really really powerful. Of course, remote operations has also stepped up. Imperial Oil told me that during the pandemic, they successfully moved one of their Curl operating centers from Fort Mac down to Calgary. And originally that was because of the fires, but with the pandemic, it became an imperative. So they up and moved it. What do you think? I mean, are you seeing your customers doing in this whole world of remote operations? Is this a topic that besides my one example I have, are you seeing this sort of thing turn into a real topic for your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I read your book, and a couple of us were through your course as well early on. And one of the things that stuck with us was there was those few things you mentioned, right? The autonomous systems, the introduction of IoT, big data, and then bringing that together in a way where information can be processed with AI. Really, it really resonated with us. Like, we thought, oh, Geoffrey's totally speaking our language, because that was exactly what we saw as the potential solution to some of the things that were coming up in our initial investigations into the market in the field. So we saw people wanting, like I said, to reduce the site visits, but one of the key factors in that was, how can we leave the responsibility with the operators in a way that they're just enabled in their position and able to go about doing their job without having to interact and interface more or changing the processes around that. And the idea of sort of running the overall production system in the most autonomous manner you can is really what we started to try to tap into. And the easiest first step into that was automating the inspection process. What we saw, the value that we saw there, I think, was really showcased coming out of COVID. So we did a major installation back in the spring. And our lead customer there, they had been operating a number of fields. They installed our system out on a number of fields, but one of them had about 75 assets, and they had a team of 3 employees and a couple of contractors working there. And as they came back out of COVID, they wanted to bring this field back online. So they said, well, the only way we can get this done is by taking Wave9's monitors, installing them across the field, and then taking and reducing that operating team to the internal employees and letting go of the contract staff, right? And when they did that, so they had the intention to essentially begin managing this field with just a little over half of the size of team they had before.
Yeah.
And they managed to get it done. So yeah. So in the end, they are now, we charge them about $45,000 to cover the monitoring of that equipment, and in exchange they've saved 2 full salaries, right? So their previous labor expenses would have been over $200,000 higher to maintain those 2 contract support staff, right? So but in a way that those 3 remaining individuals have still have complete authority and responsibility over the area that they're assigned to. Yeah. And that they continue operating it in a very similar state to the way they were before, right? So it's really key, I think, that when you go through that transition, it's done in a way that really is in tune with the people in the field working on it, and the people who are surrounding them, in terms of what they need from the data and everything. There's definitely some gaps in the traditional way.
Yeah, there's no question. There's a lot of work to be done in this whole area, for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of us that I've spoken with who are deeply immersed in all of this see a very slow adoption of technology in comparison to other industries. Like, a lot of us that come in from, with an outside lens from other industries and things like that, see such a slow transition or transformation. And for us, we think that, or at least our perspective, I think that it boils down to a couple of core skill areas, like particularly change management and other kinds of digital fluency, let's say. From your perspective, I wonder what do you feel is like the barriers there? What do you think is holding the industry back from attaining the same kind of benefits that other industries have seen from this kind of transformation?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because when you spend enough time in the industry, if you're in the industry for a long period of time, you see change happening. So you kind of wonder, like, why are we so slow in this? There isn't any one reason, unfortunately. I mean, I wish there was, but in many cases, it's the age of these assets. If you do a classic time to value calculation on an innovation on an old asset, if the end of life of that asset is fast approaching, it really discourages you from putting any investment in it, because you're not going to recover your investment. There's the general fear of novelty that in this industry. The industry prides itself on safety, on its reliability, on asset integrity, no spills, no compliance issues. So the industry, when you think about it, is really based and built around the idea of trying to minimize the degree of variability that happens in the day-to-day. And there's no greater way to create variability than introducing something novel into a business that runs very, very, very well. And then, of course, the employees are, of course, compensated to and rewarded and motivated to maintain the status quo, this sort of steady state, unchanging, highly reliable, very safe way of doing business. So without the incentive structure in place, the employees do precisely what management wants them to do, which is don't change it. And so that also gets in the way. And of course, the pandemic has torn the curtain off of this. We were all forced. I mean, even today, Ian, as part of this conversation, when you think about it, here we are in two different provinces having a meeting, which is being recorded live. Like there's no post-production on this little video. The pandemic has shown that we can do some really creative things with these digital tools, and we can adopt change very, very quickly. One executive in my interview said to me that he thinks the industry has advanced 20 years in just the space of 2 because of the pressure of the pandemic. So there's lots of factors here, but there's no one silver bullet that I would say is the reason why the industry is so slow. I mean, and I'm always interested to learn what other companies are doing to adopt change faster. You've got a bunch of organizations you've touched on that are implementing change. What are they doing? Are they doing anything specifically interesting, novel, or creative that helps accelerate the pace of change in working with you?
Well, I think with us we see a wide range. In some cases, the folks we're working with are very their mindset is very innovative to begin with, and they feel a bit constrained. Those individuals tend to actually make more progress on all of this, I think, including, I would say, the reliability in many cases. So there absolutely, we see the mentalities around sort of this fear of novelty or just not wanting to rock the boat. When we went out and talked with some of the initial production managers that we spoke with as we came about our platform, they mentioned things like, I trust my guys out there. That's why we don't have technology today, right? I trust my guys to go and check that well and make sure everything is running all right, right? And we said, well, what would you need from a technology system? And they said things like, I need to see it and hear it. They essentially wanted like a virtual presence. And I feel like if you can deliver that, if you can deliver a situation that is as close to the existing sort of paradigm around process management and everything, that the adoption accelerates. The fewer changes from a process, technology, and responsibility standpoint that you can introduce, the more effective it'll be. So a lot of our time has been spent on minimizing that change to begin with, and then enabling the people who are looking at it with the tools they need. So, we've done some lunch and learns just to bring familiarization to the technology, things like cloud and big data concepts, network theory and the benefits of taking data from one system and sharing it with the other. We've recommended certain resources like Cotter's change management profile for organizational change. Your book, for instance, around the sort of digital fluency, I think is an excellent resource for getting an understanding about the things that you're going to have a conversation about with someone like me who might be way deeper into certain areas, right? But you need to have that common ability to communicate around these things, and the organizations that are getting there, that are building that fluency, those ones I would say are the ones that are doing better than others. But it really, in some respects, I think it also comes down to having an understanding, not only in an innovation section in the company, but more widespread how innovation should properly be done so that it's not as scary, right? Like there are ways to bring in technology improvements or process improvements that are not going to risk the outcome. But you have to follow that process, and you have to collaborate with folks that know how to do that, right? So, startups and smaller companies, we're very good at understanding how to balance that risk and delivery of an actual solution that works. But we need to be able to sit down and talk with folks inside the company that can really articulate the problem too. But I think that's kind of where I see the relationship that way. If we were sitting here in the future, I'm interested to know kind of, we see only what's happening a year or two in advance of us, right? And in some respects, we're really focused in on the exact solutions that we're providing to the industry. But if you look further out into the future on, in that kind of widespread or wide angle lens, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think in 5 years we might be sitting here talking about? Do you think it's going to be similar challenges, or do you think there's some shifts happening now in those skill sets and things?
Yeah, I mean, the industry, oil and gas changes at an industrial level very, very slowly. And McKinsey did a study many years ago that's always resonated with me, where they tracked the pace of change or the adoption of an innovation by industrial sector. And what their analysis showed was that an innovation that reaches 50% market penetration in telecommunications, say, which is a fast change industry, takes about 5 to 6 years to accomplish the same thing. Invent something, innovate it, prove it, and then roll it out to just 50% of the sector in oil and gas takes 30 years. So we are a slow change industry. So we as a sort of advisors to industry, we overestimate how quickly things can change in this sector. We really do. We think it's going to happen overnight, but takes a long time. But we also typically underestimate the impacts that these innovations are going to have. And so we struggle to imagine what the future could look like. And whatever future we think we can imagine, we think it's going to happen a lot faster than it actually does. And people have to realize, the bulk of oil and gas's running infrastructure today all predate the internet era. They predate big data. They predate mobile computing. They can't change materially in 5 years because they're running 24/7, and you've got these tiny little windows where you can introduce change, assuming you had the capital. And as I mentioned earlier at the top of this episode, we are really in a capital constrained world because capital is going to things like decarbonization. It's going to the tech giants in terms of capital supply. What's going to happen in 5 years? The demand curve for oil won't feel like it's changed that much at all. In order for us to really move the demand curve for oil, we need to embrace infrastructure changes to transportation and buildings. And when you think about it, those don't change quickly or easily. It'll be 5 years before the automakers all have a full lineup of low carbon vehicles. And by the time you or I, we kind of mobilize the money to kind of fix our homes, it's going to be another 4 or 5 years minimum before we figure that out. There's just not enough people out there that can do home repair and do things like reduce the energy footprint of physical residences. Now, oil and gas, I say that on the producer side and the demand curve. Services companies, though, is a different story. Services are much more amenable to digital innovation and change. And I think what people should be doing is looking to the services industry for the early clues around what the sector is going to look like, because the services industry can try new things and do things at a faster pace. Of course, this raises the question, and you're in the world of building these kinds of future technologies. There's looming talent issues out there. I wonder if you could comment on where you see this talent supply and talent shortages starting to emerge in the industry, and to a degree what impacts those are going to have on the sector.
Well, I think that there's an interesting. So many of these things tend to come down to some perspectives, right? Like I think that there's actually a lot of talent outside the industry that can take on some of these different challenges very well. And I think it's developing really rapidly as well. Things like the data science sector or just general data analytics and that kind of knowledge and skill set. I think that there's a couple of challenges. I think that one stems from the sort of the ESG and perception around oil and gas. and the attraction of that talent to some degree. And I think that when it can be applied in a way that the messaging is correct, I think it's much easier maybe to get the right people into the right place and get something done there. So, for instance, we've hired cloud architect and data scientists, things like this that can take on and look at problems around, particularly the ESG side, around recognition of leaks in an image using AI. And then the same skill set is then applied to operational parameters, things like, well, we're talking with one company now about how to identify the efficiency of the power that they're using to run pump jacks and things like that, and whether there's opportunities to reduce the overall power consumption and, by extension, the emissions and things that they have in that operation. But so there's a couple of different challenges there in attracting it, but I think that the talent is developing. It's a challenge of bridging it. Like we need to get that raw talent in the big data and IoT space integrated in with the industrial knowledges and process that has to come from addressing a problem in oil and gas, and finding that combination is pretty tough, just because they've kind of grown in different directions, right? But I thought there's a couple other interesting points you made there. One was that the old tech is so ingrained from 20, 30 years back. And one of the things now that we see is a lot of pain around how to deal with it. So this again comes to another sort of organizational challenge, which I'm not sure I have an answer to, but we often have producers say, I collect all kinds of data off of certain assets, but only about 15% of that data is actually valuably used. And it has to do with the architecture of how those systems work. Like they were built to just collect the data and then it sits somewhere or tells one person what's happening. But there's a lack of integration between those systems and other systems. The whole value that comes out of cloud computing and sharing of information between the different players in the system really needs to get stepped up in a way that's helpful, not like there's a lot of fear around sort of cyber and sharing and everything, but I think it comes from a lack of understanding in that space. So the other thing I would say is that just increasing the level of understanding about what's possible and getting out of some of these mindsets around how the fundamental framework doesn't exist or something. It does. It's there. It's ready to be applied, and it can be applied really successfully. But you need to collaborate with people who can kind of make it happen, I guess. And I think that one of the important things is that when you said it takes another 30 years to, once the change starts rolling, it takes kind of 30 years to get that in place. That doesn't have to be the case anymore. And the mindset around the speed of delivery and integration and things like that really can change right now. And you need people who can understand how to make that happen and get it in place. So for instance, early on when we spoke with one of the customers we did pilots on, they said, I don't want to be dealing with like long installation times or maintenance of this equipment and everything. So right from the start, we designed our data collection equipment if it's needed. Like we have both the data collection from a well site where we collect photos and operational data like power, pressure, and things like that. That hardware, if it needs to be installed, can be installed in about 3 minutes if there's certain test features at a pump jack. And even if there isn't, we can get on and off a site in about 10 minutes and get something set up. That's kind of, to them, it was unheard of. Like how is that even possible? And we said, well, and if you do have issues with something, you put it in a box and send it back to us. We send you a replacement. It's a total shift in the way that they are used to working with a sort of third party supplier of that service, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's really important to continue having those wide engagements with companies to really understand that and find these opportunities where you can kind of break down some of those old mindsets around that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be a very exciting conference, I think, because these topics and others, there will be panels, presentations, some small trade show floor. There'll be lots to discuss and explore on the adoption of these technologies. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up this little video?
No, I think we covered some really interesting stuff. I'm really looking forward to some of the discussions that are going to be happening there. The autonomization of operations, the integration, especially of AI, in order to help process the kind of reams of data that are coming in, not only from new systems but old systems and things like that too. And I'm really looking forward to connecting with people who are interested in sitting down and having some of those conversations about where all of this can go, right? Specifically, those producers that are looking to think about reducing their costs and building a more financially and environmentally sustainable operation out into the future. So they're well positioned for those next 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to some of the other content too. So tapping into some of the training and everything that's available. Do you have anything kind of coming down the pipe soon, Geoffrey?
Well, in my case, I have my new book, which will be out in February. We're just working on finalizing the manuscript this month. I'm working with a team of editors to help frame it and get it shaped correctly. It'll then go into what's called copy edit, and from there they start nitpicking the periods and the commas and the punctuation and the like. And then cover design, get a title, do all the registration and other nonsense. But it'll be ready for market by February, and its focus will be on how do you accelerate digital adoption in industry, featuring these 9 case studies. And it's going to look at all the different business models that are emerging, and there will be a specific and extensive discussion around change and change management issues. Because at the end of the day, digital in oil and gas is much less of a technology problem and much more of an attitude, behavioral mindset shift that industry has to go through. So it should be very exciting. Let me pull up if people are interested in attending the conference, there is a discount code that's available. The code is SPEAKER20, SPKR20, and it's just there in the black box on the screen. If you go onto the Internet of Things conference for oil and gas website and look for that registration link, put in that code, and it'll get you a discount off of the cost to register. You should move quickly though, because it is coming up very fast next week, Wednesday and Thursday. So with that, let's bring this conversation to a close. Ian, thank you very much for taking the time today to talk through what's going to happen at this event and perspectives on changes to the industry.
Yeah, thank you very much too, Geoffrey. It was great conversation.
Lots of fun. So with that, I'll say farewell and look for another episode in the not too distant future. Bye for now.